enterprise scale sort of task, and then that requires real-time decision making. So maybe when you're creating like agentic sort of workflows, then this kind of pattern is required. Pattern architecture patterns, if you're familiar with solution architecture, it's like a blueprint, okay, to say, okay, this is the pattern I'm trying to follow it for me to be able to achieve a particular set of solution, So that's what architecture patterns is all about. For instance, now let's imagine we have things like monolithic application architecture. We have what we call software as a service architecture. We have what we call microservice, pattern architecture. We have what we call data architecture, data mesh, data fabric. All these things have their patterns. Okay, CI/CD pipeline design and architecture. The same thing happens in agentic AI. It also has its own pattern. That's what we're talking about. The second type, which I will show you not necessarily a full demo, but I'll show you a real life scenario where I and my team have actually leveraged on this RAG and agent pattern to deliver a real life solution. So RAG and agent pattern is something that I have utilized with my team. So that's the retrieval augmented generation feed. So the concept of RAG and agent is that we have what we call retrieval augmented generation, which is mostly utilized when we are building LLM models, and that can actually feed live knowledge into the agent. So for instance, now the agent can then leverage on an LLM system, whereby we still have like a RAG sort of agent that can help to ensure that it's not just retrieving what is in your, let's say, whatever scope or document or data that is given to it. It can also combine it with the agent process, which is reasoning and acting as well. Okay, so that is just to reduce hallucination, because AI do hallucinates. So you can reduce hallucination and then improves accuracy. That's the pattern. I'll show you an example. We have another pattern called multi-agent. So multi-agents, for instance, if you're using Claude, for instance, maybe you're building an agentic AI sort of workflow in Claude, for instance, Claude has the capability whereby you're not just creating just one orchestrator. You can have one parent orchestrator, then you can have what we call the sub agents that can run multiple tasks in a particular sequence. There are use cases for that. Let's imagine, for instance, you want to deploy an application into the cloud ecosystem. Most of us who are familiar with it would know that when you're deploying an application in the cloud system, there are some prerequisites. You have to define your region. You have to set your VPC, your virtual private compute, or your connect. You have to have like a sort of a segregation for your network space. You have to define all sort of network compartments. So there are different things. So you might want to say, okay, let this agent run this prerequisite for me to prepare this before this next agent then continues that. So all of these things has its own sort of pattern. Then we have the last but not the least, AutoGen and Crew AI. Now this framework leverages on two separate things together, especially when you're running multi-agent sort of workflow. Again, it's quite sort of maybe like a complex sort of workflow. So what it does is that the AutoGen focuses on flexible, conversation-driven, and autonomous agent dialogues, while the Crew AI emphasizes more around structure and then role-based workflow and orchestration. So you can combine these two frameworks to actually deliver a solution. One is talking about the conversation in terms of how it retrieves and how it responds, collects information, and then also working in form of an agent. Then the other one is mostly concerned about the structure, role-based workflow, and orchestration. These are different patterns that we have. All right. So let's quickly move on then. So what are the key benefits of agentic AI? What are the key benefits of agentic AI? Number one, productivity. Most of you know that. When you have systems that can automate process for you and can even make decisions, of course, it's going to save you some time, right? There's productivity, there's accuracy there. Because sometimes, when you're able to perfect create certain workflows and you've mastered it, you've tested it, you've validated it, it's passed the proof of concept, and then it can actually help in terms of minimizing errors in terms of what you normally do manually in the first place. So all these repetitive tasks that you mostly do and we can get tired or weary, the system can actually automate that. There's no fatigue when it comes to agentic AI. They don't book leave, they don't go on leave, they don't go on sick leave, they don't go on maternity or paternity. it runs as much as once you have the infrastructure there, you're paying for resources depending on the ecosystem you're running from, is good to go, right? Scalability, of course, you can scale your task depending on the sort of workload that you're running. You can manage that scalability there depending on how skilled you are in terms of designing the architecture for your AI. Then innovation, of course, it brings benefits, faster time from insight to prototype, solutions, collaboration, all sort of things. Just as it's got benefits, it has its own risk. When it comes to agentic AI, I will tell you flat. This is very common. It's productive, it's good, it's beneficial, but trust me, it's as risky as its benefit. It's very risky because when you leave systems to autonomous system, when you leave things to run on its own and make decisions for you, you have to know what you're doing when you're building it, or else it can also turn out to become the otherwise. Okay. So what are the use cases? What are the use cases when it comes to agentic AI? My focus is more of academia, business, and workplace. But let me talk about general use case here. Most of the ones that maybe people can relate with. For instance, research. We can have agentic AI sort of workflows or processes in the area of research. Create some autonomous literature reviews to say if we know that when, for instance, let's say you have this. You have a researcher who is creating content every now and then, and the content really, they already know the sort of information that they need from it. They can create an agent to do some refinements, things that are more repetitive that they will have done manually. System can actually help to do that. Software development, most developers today, even my own team,